Welcome to the podcast growth series. If you're ready to grow your audience, increase your downloads, and finally see your podcast gain the traction it deserves, this series is for you. Over the next 12 episodes, I'll guide you step by step through strategies to help you understand your audience, make your content more discoverable, and create episodes that listeners love to share. This isn't just a series for inspiration or fluff. It is designed to help you achieve real, tangible growth. Each episode's built on the last, giving you practical, actionable insights you can implement right away. By the end, you have a complete system for sustainable podcast growth, and you have achieved real progress towards the audience and impact you've always wanted. So grab your notebook and pen, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 4 of the podcast growth series. I am so excited you're here. Today we're talking about building a loyal listener community. So how to build, engage, and grow a thriving podcast community, which, let's face it, podcasting can get very lonely very quickly if you are not getting feedback from people. So today, that is what we're going to be talking about. So my goal today is to teach you how to build a dedicated community, encourage listeners to share your podcast episode, to become your number one fans, and turn casual listeners into superfans. So let's get started. So community is key for podcast growth and sustainability, right? So I talk a lot about podcast SEO. If you go back and just scroll down 3 times with your fingers on this podcast in general, and you're going to see that I talk a lot about SEO. But the community part of your podcast is really important, right? Because we can SEO optimize our podcast all day, but if what's inside of our podcast or the podcast episode themselves are not building a community, then guess what? People just don't care. When it comes time for you to sell something, for you to launch something, then you have nobody to sell it to because people just don't care about what you have to say. So the sustainability for podcasts really does depend on the community that you're building, because without it, you're just talking to the void. Ain't nobody here for that. So today we're going to cover creating community spaces, how to encourage people to become your superfans, right? Like, how do we get people to be part of this grassroots movement and turning them into superfans to begin with? So let's talk about creating spaces for your community. So listeners crave connection beyond the podcast. So there are a couple of ways that you can encourage people to come into our community. You can do something like a Facebook group. Something that I feel is working really well lately are Telegram groups. They're just becoming more and more popular. You can do Mighty Networks, whatever. The medium itself doesn't matter. Just pick one that you vibe with and go there for you. Now, I personally have a Facebook group and I poured the time and energy into it. And then I'm like, you know what? This is just so much more extra work for me. And I just kind of like left my group. And if I'm being super honest, it's probably been like a year since I have done anything inside of that group. So, my group is dead. Okay, I have people in there, but my group is dead. And that's just because I don't nurture it. And the reason why I haven't really done anything with my group is because I really focused on my email list, which is another way that you can create that community. So just because you don't have people inside of a specific container, right, like a Facebook group or something like that, doesn't mean that you cannot create that community with your email list. People love my emails. By the way, if you're not in my email list, make sure that you get in because I share a lot of good stuff on that list, okay? So that is another way that you can create community is by pouring into people, and you might find that you vibe with one more than you vibe with the other. It's really completely up to you the direction that you want to go. But the way to keep the engagement high in whatever direction you're going, whether you're going to put people inside of a group or you want people to go to your email list or whatever it is that you need to give value. Gone are the days that you can just like, if you have a Facebook group, you can post some silly meme and hope people will engage. Yeah, that like might get people to react to it or whatever, but like, we are so busy and there's so many ways that we can consume content and so many ways that we can spend our time nowadays. And with so many different options, we want to make sure that we're pouring our time and energy into something that actually is going to give us something back. So give value and use the power of storytelling. This is something that you can go back and listen to the previous episode, episode 3, where I do talk about storytelling. But storytelling will be super helpful whether you are writing out emails or whether you are inside of a group or something like that. Because remember, humans connect with humans and humans love storytelling. Now, let's talk about encouraging listeners to really be part of a grassroots movement. So, I don't want you to get caught up here and overthink this part or anything like that. I will share with you how I do this on my own podcast so that you can see how I have been doing this thing for a long time now. And it's very subtle, but it works. And my whole spiel is focus on podcast SEO and put social media second. If you want to show up on social, do that. If it lights you up, go for it. But your podcast will grow whether or not you have social media. And what I have done, what I have created is started this movement, which again, it's not anything loud. It's not like people have t-shirts or anything like that, but it's this idea that we're here for sustainability. We're here for long-term growth, and we're not here for the hustle of social media. If you want to do it, fun, great, go for it. But it's not the bread and butter of what we do. And I have created that movement because the people that are attracted to me, they're like, oh my gosh, yes, this sounds exactly like what I need. This is what I want. I want my podcast to be the main thing and everything else to be everything else. And if I don't do it, it's okay. It's not going to make or break my business. So this is a way that I have created that listener grassroots movement, because now they understand why they want to be, quote unquote, on my team. They understand why they don't want to waste time on social media. And maybe because, they're moms and they have little kids and they just don't have time for social media. Or like social media just is not appealing to them. Or maybe they're not on social, period. So now they're like, okay, I like this and I'm part of this movement. So it's kind of like, for me personally, it's more of like a subconscious thing that people are like, yes, I like that. I'm like totally subscribing to that idea. It is not this loud in your face. We are this grassroots movement and this is how we go. But listen, if you are the latter camp, that works too. It's all about just encouraging people to partaking in something bigger. Like there's a cause, right? There's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why we're listening to this podcast. And that's really all it is. It's you just letting people in on the fact that the time that you're spending with you, it's part of a bigger cause, something bigger than themselves. It's not something fleeting. It's not something that they're going to forget the next day. It's something impactful. And that's really all it is. And I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, now on top of everything else, I have to start this grassroots movement, because I've been doing it in a very ninja, subtle, stealth kind of way. But that's why people are attracted to me, because they're like, yes, please get me off of social media. I don't want to do it. I want to do it when I feel like it. I don't want to be dependent on an algorithm. And that's really all it is. Now, the next part to this equation or puzzle, whatever Blizzard wrote, is how do you turn listeners into superfans? So the way that a podcast listener engages with your content is, let's say they come to the podcast app and they search something. This is just one of the many ways that people can find you, okay? But entertain me for a second. They look for something in your podcast episode comes up. They listen to it and they're like, cool, I like it. And then they'll be like, okay, let me listen to another episode. And then they'll go and listen to another episode. And that episode hits home with them too. So then they're like, I like this. So then they go and listen to another one. And then the next thing you know, they're binging your podcast episode. Another way is, of course, somebody might share a podcast episode with them. Like, so let's say a friend shares your podcast episode with them and they're like, oh, I like this. So then they go, it's even easier, right? Because your podcast was shared with somebody that they know, like, and trust already. So you already have that bonus point going for you. So they might even be quicker to go and binge your podcast to begin with. There are a couple of things that are going on here. Your titles need to be on point, right? So your titles need to do a really good job at hooking people in. And when you're thinking about your titles, and honestly, also the podcast episode itself, you need to remember that you're creating this piece of content for two kinds of people. One who has no idea who you are, and the other person who is your superfan, somebody who has been listening to you for a very long time. So You always need to give value. You always need to have a podcast episode that engages people. Your podcast episode needs to make people feel like they're part of something bigger. And it needs to be exclusive in a kind of way. And what I mean by that is it just needs to feel so valuable and like, my gosh, do people know about this? Like, I need to share this with everybody else. Everybody needs to know about this thing. That's what your podcast needs to feel like. And how you do that is by being mindful of other people's time, right? So if I am listening to your podcast for the very first time, don't start your podcast episode with like some crazy side tangent that has nothing to do with the episode itself, because you have already lost me. This has happened to me so many times where I'm looking for something very specific, and the first, I kid you not, 15 minutes of an episode is somebody bantering about something that has nothing to do with the podcast itself. So it's okay for you to bring aspects of storytelling. I recommend you do, that you bring parts of you into your podcast, but make sure that your podcast still has a goal and that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And be mindful of where you're going off of on these little side tangents. Listen, I go off on tangents all the time, but I am mindful about where I place them. I don't start an episode talking to you about, I don't know, the kitty I fed on the side of the street 2 weeks ago, because if you're like, gosh, who is this girl? And I don't even like cats. Why is she talking to me? I'm just going to lose you, So you have to be mindful about how you place the things that are not pertinent to the episode itself. The timing of it all does matter. And as long as you're not filling your episode with fillers, honestly, like, imagine you go buy some food, right? And you want the best quality, organic, whatever, like let's say organic rice. Like you want to make sure that you're getting organic rice. Like you don't want your organic rice to have like wood pulp and like additives and like whatever, right? You just want to get organic rice. So like, let's take that analogy and apply it to your podcast. You want the person who's coming to your show to get something out of your show, not the extra stuff. It's okay for you to include storytelling and things that will add to the experience of the podcast itself, but don't just start talking for the sake of talking because you feel like, oh my gosh, this podcast episode is only 7 minutes long and I have to add more things on here, because you're going to lose people. So as long as you're always delivering value and not bombarding people with extra things that add nothing to their lives, you're going to be fine and you're going to engage people, and people are going to feel like they're part of something bigger, because getting value these days is very difficult in this AI world, because there's a lot of information. Do not get me wrong. There's information everywhere. We're bombarded with it all the time, literally 24/7, but really good, thoughtful information that deeply resonates and moves people and helps people have a belief shift that is few and far between. And that's where you can come in by not overthinking your content and just thinking, okay, how would this content light me up right now? How would this piece of content make me want to share this with somebody else? And there lies the secret to you creating this podcast episodes that create superfans. Because I do have my superfans, and every time that they reach out to me, it has to do with how helpful my content is and how to the point it is and how just concise it is and how I stand for one thing, right? Which is podcast SEO. Grow your podcast through SEO. That's how we're going to grow our show. And your show is the main thing and everything else is everything else. And that's how people resonate with me. So what is the thing for you? What is the podcast SEO version for your podcast? How can you be clear and to the point, succinct with your podcast, right? And that doesn't mean that you're going to have, 10-minute episodes. That's not what I mean. I'm saying if you're going to have 30-minute episodes, how can those 30 minutes be just enriching and fulfilling and enlightening to somebody else? So you just have to find your version and just be mindful of bringing in those pieces of who you are to your audience, because that really is the secret to getting people to engage with you and to go from, oh yeah, whatever, I'm a casual listener, or I listened to this one episode and I kind of like forgot about this person, to, oh my gosh, I love this podcast and I will not miss one single episode. Now, I do have a homework assignment for you, and I will leave that linked in the show notes so you can go ahead and grab it. If you're already in the list, I will send that out for you today. And oh my gosh, next month is going to be a fun one we are talking about collaborations for growth, right? So we're still in the growth stage, but guess what? Month 6, we're talking about monetization, because that is really why we're here, right? Like, we want to be able to monetize our podcast so that we can make some money around here and pay those bills and go on vacations and like live the life, right? So that's what we're here for. So that's what we're doing month 6. But next month, we're still talking about the growth stage, because I want you to be super visible and for you to have that solid foundation so that when we do start monetizing, you're going to make some moolah around here. Yeah. All right, my love, I cannot wait to see you in the next episode. See you then. Thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast growth series. Here's what to do next. Number 1, head over to julianabarbati.com/homework to grab your homework assignment for today's episode and start taking action on what you learned. Number 2, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next step in your podcast growth journey. And number 3, come back on the 1st of the month next month for the next episode in the series. Until then, stay focused, take action, and don't let distraction pull you away from building the podcast you have always envisioned. You've got this, and I'll see you next month.